success, wealth, recognition. Gary Cooper had it all, lost it all, then turned a revolutionary discovery into the success paradox. Here's Gary.
I'm honored to welcome my guest this week, who also wrote the foreword of the book I wrote with my buddy Will Wilkinson. Marci Shimoff is a best-selling author and world-renowned transformational teacher. She is here to help us discover the secrets of being happy for no reason, loving for no reason, and creating miracles in our lives. Marci, it is so great to see your face.
It's great to get to be with you. Any friend of Will's is a friend of mine.
How did y'all meet?
We met on a cruise ship where our mutual friend Yakov Smirnoff invited us. Yakov is a great comedian, and Will was doing some writing with him, and Yakov's a dear friend, and that's where we met, and we were fast friends.
So, we were writing the book, and we were doing all this stuff, the book, which became Success Paradox, and I was like, Will, we need to get somebody really cool to write the foreword to our book. And he was like, oh, we'll just get my friend Marci. I'm like, well, who the hell is Marci? Little did I know it's the lady who was the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul and the writer of her own book, Happy for No Reason. And I don't know if you know this, I let go of a book idea 3 years before. And I wanted to have a series of books like Chicken Soup for the Soul. And then lo and behold, the energy in the world. And when I talk about energy and all this stuff, this weird stuff, I'm in South Carolina, people deer hunt and duck hunt and love NFL and college football. And when I start talking about energy and meditation, people look at me like I'm the weirdest guy in the world. But I let go of that idea, and then I ended up with you. How weird is that?
Well, I think it's very cool. I'm delighted.
It's no coincidence, is it?
No coincidence.
So I think your story is amazing, and your success and all that's cool, but I love to know, how did Marci become Marci? You were a little girl once. You didn't know that you wanted to be a book writer and all that stuff when you were a kid, did you?
Not at all. There's a saying, of course, we teach what we most want to learn. And I most wanted to learn how to be happy because I was born depressed, Gary. I came out of the womb with what I call existential angst. I had great parents, a great family, and I was just an unhappy kid. It's like I had this dark cloud around me. And so when I was growing up, I just wanted to be happy. So my childhood solution that I found worked temporarily was something called sugar. I became a sugar addict, and that didn't work very well. By the time I was in high school, I was about 35 pounds overweight and on a lot of sugar crashes. So when I was in my 20s, I decided I was going to set goals for myself, and that once I reached those goals, then I'd be happy. And Gary, I set 5 goals for myself, and I'm going to share them with you because I think a lot of people can relate. I wanted to have a successful career helping people. I wanted to have a wonderful husband or life partner, great friends, a comfortable home, and the equivalent of Halle Berry's body. And I got 4 out of the 5. I don't have Halle Berry's body, but I have a healthy body for which I'm grateful. And I worked really hard to get all my ducks in a row. And I know you know this story because it's part of your story too. And I had a turning point moment. It was in 1998. I had 3 books in the top 5 on the New York Times bestseller list at the same time. And I had just finished giving a speech to 8,000 people, and I had autographed 5,432 books. And on one hand, I felt like an author rock star. I mean, my client had a massage therapist massaging my hand so I could keep on signing. But after I autographed that last book, Gary, I went up to my hotel room, which was the penthouse suite that my client had gotten for me. And I walked over to these huge windows overlooking Lake Michigan. And I looked out and I took in that view. And I turned around and I collapsed onto the bed and burst into tears. And I burst into tears because I realized I'd had everything I thought I needed to be happy, and it wasn't doing it. And I couldn't fool myself into thinking that the next thing would do it. Because what I'd found is, yeah, you get something and you're happy for a little while, but I still had that emptiness inside of me that I had had as a kid. And that's when I dove headfirst into the study of happiness. And I interviewed all the researchers, and I interviewed 100 unconditionally happy people. And I started doing what they were doing, and it worked. I would say I went from a D in happiness, I was almost failing, to an A. And I'm still a work in progress, but I'm solid A. And that to me is a miracle that I actually could ever be happy. So that's how I got into all of this.
That story is incredible. You got a D, I got a F minus. And as Will and I were doing the book, I think what we came up with the word doaholic. You know, like you were saying, you came up with those 5 things. And I just knew I really wanted to be successful. I remember I was in grad school. My wife was in law school, and I told her, I'm going to retire by the time I'm 40, or I'm going to be able to, but not. And I did. You know, I was there. I had the car, the wife, the house on the hill, the 4 children. I had it all. And just like you, my soul was empty. And I tried to fill it up with, like you said, it could be sugar, it could be workaholism, it could be drugs, alcohol, sex, you name it. It doesn't matter. Food. I think there's a big addiction with Amazon today. I really do. I mean, how many FedEx trucks can come to one house at a time? There's a lot of that. My addiction was just a little more hideous. But the first addiction was work. And so that's where we came up with the word doaholic. And it sounds like you were a doaholic as well.
Absolutely. I love that word doaholic. And I think that it's an epidemic in our society, doaholic, because we have been trained that way. I mean, you know, that's how we grew up. Our worth is going to be dependent upon what we accomplish, what we do. And that is really backwards. You know, it doesn't lead to success. I said a phrase in the movie The Secret that I think is very relevant to this conversation. And that is that we have it backwards in our society. We think that success is going to be the key to happiness. It's actually the other way around. Happiness is the key to success. The happier you are, the greater your success will be. And it won't but be just the paper kind of success or the showy status kind of success. It'll be the success that comes with fulfillment, which is what it is you're talking about, Gary.
Marci, I watched some of your stuff last night, and I had this chip on my shoulder, and I thought that was an asset. I thought this chip on my shoulder was an asset, and it sounds kind of like you might have too. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I didn't realize that was activating that fight or flight mode. And you talked about in one of your talks about how that is attacking our immune system, how it is weakening us, our bodies, our mental, our physical, our mental health. And we have it backwards. There's this old way of succeeding, and there's a new way of succeeding. And you and I have found that is a secret. What are your thoughts on the old way versus the new way versus our health benefits? There's a lot packed in there, so take as long or as little as you want to, because what you said last night was like, how did little Gary not know that?
Well, I think you were referring to, there was some wonderful research. There's been a lot of research done on, of course, the effects of stress on us. There was one piece of research done by the Institute of Heart Math, and they're the world's leading researchers on the heart and happiness. And what they found is that if you're frustrated or angry for just 5 minutes, it can weaken your immune system for up to 6 hours. But if you're feeling love and gratitude, appreciation for just 5 minutes, it'll strengthen your immune system for up to 6 hours. So we think about how much time during the day we're spending in that stress response, in that fight or flight, in that anger. I'm frustrated at the car that was in front of me on my way to work today, or I'm frustrated about, how my spouse is showing up or what's going on in my work. And so what we need to do is find some ways that we can move more into what science has identified the stress response. It has its own brain activity, its own heart rhythms, and its own biochemistry. They've also identified what's called the love response. We know the love response. You get a smile on your face, you feel a warmth in your heart. It could be somebody walks in the door that you haven't seen for a while and you're just so happy to see them. It could be your beloved four-legged and you just get this smile on your face. Well, the love response has its own brain activity, its own heart rhythms. Develop that as more of our default state rather than going through life in that stress response.
When I was watching you in that video last night, I spent years in that response mode. I guess you would call it really reaction mode. I allowed others to dictate my frustration, happiness, success, or failure. I was allowing others to really dictate how my life was versus me being in control over my own destiny, if you will. And I don't think I'm alone. You and I both know the statistics of happiness in America today. I think there's a rise of 40% of suicide in our youth today. I think there's 1 in 4 on some type of antidepressants. And so part of my mission isn't like, look, I got it all figured out, because today, I could go outside and just, my shoes could be untied and just get really frustrated and change the way. I say I'm a leaky bucket. So every day I have to fill my bucket up. And I have a routine that does that. And you have this amazing process that you don't allow people to take over your happiness. A question for you, is it happiness or contentment? Because I can have a good day and somebody can rain on my parade, but they don't get to steal my joy.
Right.
So is happiness or contentment, or is it the same thing? But I can have a really crappy day, but it doesn't mean it has to ruin my life.
Yeah. And what that means is that you have an inner state of peace and well-being that doesn't depend on your circumstances. It doesn't mean that you're walking around 24/7 with a silly grin on your face and ignoring what's going on. That's not it. It means stuff happens. People die. You're going to feel grief. Things happen. You're going to get upset. But behind that, you've got this inner backdrop of peace and well-being where you're going to bounce back more quickly. You're not going to be overtaken by it. You recognize that you have the ability, and Gary, this is what you were talking about, you have the ability to choose how you respond. Very early on, I learned a formula from one of my mentors, Jack Canfield, who was the originator of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And Jack had this little formula that I think he learned from one of his mentors. So it's being passed down. So let me pass it down here. And it's E plus R equals O. And what that stands for is event plus response equals outcome. So it's not the events in our life that create the outcomes in our life. It's the event plus our response to the event that creates the outcome. And that's where we have power. We have power to choose our response. And what I've found, Gary, is that the only difference between happy people and everybody else is that they have different habits. And one of the habits that they have is they choose how to respond to life in a way that's going to be supportive rather than a way that's going to be life-taking or diminishing.
Sounds like the E plus R equals O is like you can change your attitude no matter what happens.
Absolutely. You can change your response to what's happening, and you can choose your response. There was a very famous quote, and I don't have the exact quote down, but one of the books that most influenced me early in my life was a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And it was by Viktor Frankl, who was in the Holocaust. And he said that your basic rights can be taken away from you, but the one thing that people can't take away from you is your ability to choose how you respond. And that's how he survived the Holocaust and came out and wrote this magnificent book and was a psychiatrist and an extraordinary person.
Viktor Frankl's book changed my life. If you think you're having a bad day and you read his book and you realize that if you have meaning, you can suffer through anything. And he suffered through that. So, if my mom is not doing well, and I know like there's a bigger purpose. So if I take care of her and I do that well, when that season is over, then everything's going to be okay. You talked about, and you talk about this happiness. Is it happiness code or we're born?
Happiness set point. So the happiness set point is what explained everything to me. It was the thing where it kind of clicked and I got, oh yeah, this is why all the things in life aren't going to make me happy. So here's what the researchers have found, that we all have this set point. It's like a thermostat setting. And no matter what happens to us, whether it's good or bad, we're going to tend to hover around our happiness set point unless we do something consciously to change it. So this is why you have some great accomplishment happen. You're excited for a month or so, a week, a month, whatever, and then you come back to your original happiness set point. Same is true of people who have tragedies happen. Generally, it's been found that within about a year, they'll return to their set point. So the set point is the key to our happiness, and here's how it's determined. It's 50% genetic. All right, I wasn't born with the good genes, but I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a second. It's 10% your circumstances. Now, this is it. Everybody's chasing after the circumstances to change, but it's only 10% of the whole equation. So you're not going to get very much leverage from that. The other 40% is our habits of thoughts and behavior. And that's what we can really change to raise our happiness set point. I'm going to take it a step further and say this. The genetic piece. There are scientists in the field of epigenetics like Dr. Bruce Lipton, who wrote The Biology of Belief. And they have found that when we change our habits, we also influence our genetics. That means that 90% of our happiness set point is based in these habits. So to me, I say hallelujah to that. Science has cracked the happiness code. We know what it takes for people to be happier. This is what people have wanted from time immemorial, and we know how to get it. I think this should be taught in all the schools.
I believe that 1,000,000%. And that's why I'm just talking about me in general, and then you can apply that if you want to anybody. So you said you chased sugar when you were a little girl for happiness. Well, how quick is the half-life of sugar? It's pretty quick. And I chased work. Well, the half-life of that's pretty quick. And I was a runner. And, we talk about the runner's eye. Well, when I had 3 hip replacements and back surgery, that took running away from me. And then alcohol was always a friend of mine. And it started when I was like 13. And it became a very good companion of mine, even through work. But boy, the negative consequences could add up. So then there's all of those are temporary. So is shopping, so is porn, so is any of those temporary reliefs. So is Amazon. So then I start reading spirituality books, and I start learning about higher powers, God, religion, religiosity, meditation, all the different things. And you were talking about reprogramming, and you were talking about changing actually our genetics. There's a writer that wrote in the 20s named Emmett Fox, and he talks about changing our subconscious. And I have worked the last 6.5 years in changing my subconscious, because I would always think about the things that I can't do. And I started reprogramming myself into things that I can do. And I started attracting those things into my life. I can help others. I can do these things. And it all goes back to gratitude. And 6.5 years later, I'm talking to you. That was predestined because I started doing these things that Emmett Fox and all these amazing Buddhism and Christianity and all the great spiritual advisors and leaders in the world started teaching me. But if I started circling myself in my garden with weeds, I'm kind of a prelude to one of your other things that I just think is amazing. I would have been stuck in that rut and my subconscious would have drowned in me. It's amazing, isn't it, Marci?
It really is. I mean, and to me, so inspiring that there are some very simple ways that anybody, no matter what their circumstances, no matter where they are in the happiness scale or happiness continuum, no matter where they are, that we can all raise our happiness set point.
Gosh, I love that, Marci. All right, I hate to do this, but we have to stop here for now. Coming up in the second part of my talk with Marci Shimoff, the best-selling author and world-renowned transformational teacher, Marci shares how we can help loved ones avoid the comparison trap.
I think it all starts with our own belief in ourselves. If there's anything we can do for our kids, it's to help them feel the truth of their own being and help them follow their own heart and their own inner voice and not be in comparison to somebody else that's doing something else on the planet that they're not here to do. Really what you're here to do.
To learn and practice the Success Paradox lifestyle, visit GaryCCooper.com. The Success Paradox is a production of Forbes Books.